Hello there. So this is Shawnee and Marvelous, Chief Playing Officer, artist in love with all things circular. I'm a professional hula hooper, so I am a performer, a teacher, and also a hoopsmith. Lately, I've been doing a lot of hoopsmithing, especially with quarantine, people wanting hoops. And so because business is increasing, I just wanted to share with you some basics of hoop making so that you can begin to make your own hoops, whether you are just doing it for the fun of it, whether you are a hoop dance instructor. It's definitely economical to make your own hoops when you're doing that. So whether you're an instructor, whether you're just someone who wants to share it with other people and you want to have extra hoops, it can be beneficial to learn to make your own. So, a bit of background on who I am. I began making hoops in 2010, so it's been a whole decade now. I didn't start selling them right away. I wanted a hoop for myself, and I went online and I didn't really see any that I wanted to buy or spend that much money on. Just they weren't cute. So I was like, well, for that amount of money, I could go to the store and buy a 100-foot coil of tubing and make multiple hoops for both me and my friends. So that's what I did. I think I ended up keeping 2 hoops for myself. I gave some to my mom, and then I just gave some to random friends in Kalamazoo. And then it wasn't until a few years later, in 2014, I believe, that I really started to sell the hoops. I remember at the time I was working at a grocery store for something offensive, like $8 an hour. And there was someone who wanted to buy 3 hoops for me. And at the time, I hadn't really been selling hoops, so I just charged him $20 for each hoop. So when he handed me the $60, I was like, oh my God, this is how much I make in a shift. So I decided to keep going with it. I ended up selling hoops at the farmer's market for a couple of seasons in my town. I would occasionally sell online, but I was intimidated by the shipping process, so I didn't do a lot of that, but I would do it just custom here and there for people who reached out to me about it. So it wasn't until so I started selling hoops 2014, mostly in real life, local sales. And then about 2.5 years ago, I got set up to sell online a little bit better. I started my online sales with actually the Lunar Map once I had a website. I sell through Squarespace. So I started with that. And then eventually, I got over all my fears and hangups and resistance about selling online and actually set up shop to do that. And that has been growing the most just because you can reach so many more people than you can reach by only being physically present, even though I love that too, being at live events, festivals, all that. That's cool. Online has been where it's at for me lately. So that's who I am. That's my story with hoop making. I've learned most of this material, most of this knowledge just from Google searches and Facebook groups. But now that it's all combined in my head, I'll share it with you. So if you're here, hey Shelly. Yeah, I have 2 viewers. Oh, it's so fancy. If you're here, say something. I know Shelly. I don't know who the other viewer is, but I would like to know. So yeah, this is great if you're a teacher, facilitator, performer, or if you just want to learn how to make your own hoops. It's a little more economical. If you want to do things with a whole bunch of hoops, multiple hoops, hooping a stack, learning how to make it rather than having to spend $30, $40+ in each hoop is great. So today I'm going over the ingredients. So we will get to the techniques closer to the end, but I'm just going to show you my hoop making setup a little bit, talk about all the ingredients, which are the connections, the tubes, the tools, the tapes, and of course the elbow grease. So yeah, I'm at my desk. I'm going to pick up my camera and just show you my desk where I keep my shipping label printer, tubing samples, tapes. So here a lot of it is, some of that is washi tape. I don't use that on the hoops. Yeah, I try to keep my tapes somewhat organized in baskets. I also have a tape scrap bin that is completely chaotic. I just got these little bins today just to keep like tape scrap pallets together, because I'm going to be making some of my patchwork portals, which involve just using random scraps of tape that aren't big enough for a whole hoop, or that this is the last that I have of it, and just combining those pallets into one hoop. So it's nice to just have a little visual of what it looks like. Whoa. So the basics, hoop types. So the most basic hoop that you can make that you need the least amount of tools for, it just involves one long piece of tubing and a connector. Let me get my connector bins. So I have my toolbox right here that we'll go through, and also a box of connectors here. So yeah, the most basic style of hoop just involves a large cut of tubing and a connector. If you're getting the type of tubing that's at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever kind of major hardware store, it's irrigation tubing. It's pretty easy to work with. You will need a pipe cutter, and you'll need some kind of heat source. So you'll either need, hey Tasha, you'll either need hot water or a blow dryer to heat up the ends. So let me get this sample over here. So with this most basic style, the easy style to do, when you're buying your tubing from the hardware store, it'll come in a 100-foot coil. That will make you about 9 to 10 hoops, depending on how big you make the hoops. So yeah, this is an unconnected hoop right here. You can see it all here. And then here's a barb connector that you will find at the hardware store. So this is, I'm going to get more into the tubing later. First, I'm going to talk about the different types of hoops. So yeah, there's that basic connection. The other style of connection that you can do involves a smoother connector. So this is a flush connector. This is a special one that Hoopology makes, and this is a barbed connector. So with your most basic kind, you heat up the ends, you put this connector in there, let the end cool down. As the plastic cools down, it contracts around all of these little ridges. You can see that. It'll contract around the ridges, and then your hoop will stay connected. It's pretty hard to take it apart. You can do it if you want to, if you heat it up again with like a blow dryer, but it's pretty hard to get apart. So if you're shipping hoops, you will have to make them some way where you can coil them down. So the most common way of doing that these days, so you coil it all the way down and reconnect it. The most common way of doing that these days is to use a flush connector like this. You would put it in one end of the tubing, drill a hole for a rivet, use your rivet gun. That side is stationary, that side is fixed, and then with the other end, once you connect it, you would use your drill to make another hole and put in a push button. So if you don't know what either of those is, let me show you. So this is a rivet. It's a little metal piece. Also similar, I have a friend who works with leather. She says that they use rivets in leather work. And then I know people use rivets in like those way more industrial occupations, like, I don't know, cars. And this is your rivet gun. So I'm not going to demo that whole process right now, but the rivet side is the side that's fixed. And then you would use a bigger drill bit on the other side and insert a push button. Let me show you. So once there's a hole here, you would insert the push button. And then the button keeps it from coming apart, but then you can also press the button down so you can coil it down and ship it, or you can coil it down and travel with it. I have another hoop. I'll show you what that looks like in a final way. So you'll see here, this is the rivet, so that's the fixed side of the hoop, and this is the push button where you would press down, like so, and take it apart. So seeing that up close, this is a polycarbonate connector, so it's a clear plastic, and there's the push button. hoop. So those are the different types. The third type of hoop is going to be one that uses this connector still, but you use two of them instead of one. So this tubing, the blue tubing, this is blue HDPE. So HDPE stands for high density polyethylene. So what you're going to find at the hardware store most of the time is just kind of the normal PE, which stands for polyethylene. It's usually black. It usually has this, this little writing on the inside or outside. And then the specialty tubing manufacturers like Hoopology, they make high density polyethylene. They also make polypro tubing that comes in the different colors. So this color, I forget what they call it on their site, but on my website, I sell this hoop as the Nothing But Blue Skies. It's not up there right now, but it will be restocked. So that third type of hoop, the twist down, uses two of these. And let me give you an example. So in the twist down style of hoop, it has two connectors. So there's a connector down here and a connector on the opposite side of the tubing. So instead of cutting one giant piece like you would do for the fixed hoop or the coil down hoop, you would actually cut the two halves of the hoop. And so what happens is, even though you can't pull it apart because it's that barbed connector, the tubing can twist around each side of the connector. So you can collapse the hoop by, and I always press it down here. You can collapse the hoop by twisting it around the connectors like such. And then once you're in your figure eight, giving it a little squish and a little twist, and then you have a collapsed hoop. Yay! The coolest. Okay. So yeah, those are the main types. There is one last type that is, you're still using the push button like you would in the coil down hoops, but it's a sectional travel hoop. So this is one that's in process. Oh my goodness. It's too heavy for the toolbox. So this is in progress. What I actually need to do, because this barbed connector is already inserted into this part of the hoop, but I need to sand down this so it's smoother, because essentially I'll be taking 5 of these pieces into a sectional travel hoop so that people can just have pieces of a hoop. It'll fit into like your suitcase or carry-on, and then you can connect it all when you're done. But yeah, essentially these will all have a push button as well. So those are the 2 kinds, the very basic, the coil down with the push button, and then the twist down figure 8 hoop. Whew, oh my gosh, I feel like this is so much material that we gotta cover, but it's cool. So now that you understand the different types of hoops, I can tell you more about the tools, because if I just explain the tools without you knowing what they're potentially used for, it will make less sense. So this power drill I permanently borrowed from my dad years and years ago. I use this to drill the holes for the rivets and also the holes for the push buttons. You can also remove rivets using your drill as well. Now this is the rivet gun. It comes with a few different ends. I pretty much use 1/8 size rivets all the time, so I keep this one on there. But if you're using a bigger size rivet, there's another little piece of metal that you can interchange with this so that you can get the right size. Pretty simple. I'll go through and use it later on a scrap for us, or maybe a full hoop. And then X-Acto knife, always useful in cutting tubing and cutting tape. When I do my tapes that, like, maybe half of this is blue and half of this is the other, when I get to the point where I want to stop, I cut the tape in a slant so that it's even line here. Also, when I cut tubing and maybe the connection is tight, I'll use this X-Acto knife on the very inside of the tubing to just shave out a little bit like that. And that will make the connector go in easier. So if you're having trouble with a connector for some reason that's super tight, you can do that. Coconut oil also helps. That always helps. Cafe, yes, I'm making the barb into a push button. I don't have a smooth connector for that thickness of tubing because that's the 1-inch PE, the like super heavy, super thick. But essentially, I'll just sand it down with my Dremel tool. And yeah, I have a really big button for that. Other tools, scissors, always useful. Utility knife. I like my tape measure. Some people use like the even more flexible type of tape measure for measuring the circumference of the hoop. If you don't understand the math of it, just because it's for super beginners, I know the people watching already know this. Some of the people watching. But you'll want to, people buy their hoops according to diameter. So I think this is a 30-inch hoop right here. You know, people will be at your shop or be in real life and they'll be like, okay, I need a 30-inch hoop. They're not going to know the circumference of the hoop, really. That's your job. So you have to measure by circumference if you are selling. If you're making it for yourself and you just want to intuitively do it, you know, do whatever. But if you're selling, you must measure by circumference, so that is exact each time. You're trying to eyeball the diameter, you're trying to measure it out like this. It's going to be inconsistent because sometimes the tubing might be like a little more round here, a little bit flatter here. But if you measure it on the outside of the tubing, like so, keeping it in place as you go, then you can get a much more exact cut, right? That kind of measure. That's pretty much all the tools, yeah? Ratcheting PVC cutter, even though this is not PVC, I love it. There's a type of cutter that doesn't ratchet. I think that's harder to use because it just squishes the plastic sometimes. Then I also have this fancy little tape cutter. So with the tapes that have paper backing, I'll grab some right now. You can use this and you can set the width that you want it to cut so that if you have tape that is 1 inch in diameter like this, but you want it to be maybe 1/2 inch in diameter, maybe you want it to be 3/4 of an inch in diameter, you can cut it down to those different sizes. And reasons you might do that is because I find with 5/8 inch tubing, so like with tubing that's a lot thinner, I find that having narrower tape makes it a little easier. These days, I can still tape, the thinner tubing with 1-inch tape, and it feels more comfortable. But when I was starting out, I didn't like that. Or you could just do it for design elements too, if you want a thin strip of silver going along your hoop. Having a tape slitter tool can help you do that. Yeah. Okay. So the toolbox tour is complete. I will keep these out and we can talk about tubing widths. Oh, actually, that toolbox is done. This is more of my accessory box because I have my different drill bits in here. You need a different drill bit for whatever size rivet you're using. So I use 1/8 rivets, so I use this 1/8 drill bit a lot. And these are the 2 drill bits I have for my big push button here. Oh, not actually. This is that one. My big push button and my medium push button are actually, their button has the same diameter, so they both work with this drill bit. So yeah, I keep my drill bits, my push buttons, all in little separate containers in here. A few connections, all that. Yeah. Okay, so what's next on the list? Do y'all have any more questions? Wait. I have the barbs and flush inserts with my 80 PSI hoops, white tubing, tend to pinch when I figure 8. I haven't had the white 80 PSI pinch on my own. I know a customer it's happened to before and I replaced her hoop. One thing I would say is I notice when I'm heating up the end of it before I'm putting in the connector into the 80 psi white tubing, I try to be careful not to heat up too much of the tubing because I feel like the heat actually weakens it a little bit. So I try to only heat up the part up to like this length, right? So I would say heat up less of it and then also really let things cool down in between even each side. So like I'll cut a bunch of halves of tubing first, put the connector into one side of it, let it fully cool, and then I'm going along connecting the other ones. I come back to the ones I connected first once they're cool, and I'll attach the second piece to it, really let that cool, and then yeah, because I've actually had that problem not with the white tubing, but the black PE that's 100 psi. I'm experimenting with the 160 psi to see if it's better, but I feel like sometimes there can be like a blemish in the tube as well that'll make it more susceptible to kinking as you're coiling it down. But yeah, coconut oil is how I use that, Tasha. When I mentioned it's happening especially with the black tubing and the smooth white connector that sometimes the white connector is just too, it's a little too big, so it's a little too tight. So once this side is riveted and this side has its push button, if I'm having trouble like getting it all the way on there, just smoothing a little bit of coconut oil, like very, very little right here, can help the process. What also helps, like what I showed you with the X-Acto knife, like just smoothing out that inner edge of the tubing so that it's less of a right angle and more of a slant. That helps. If it's still tough, then what I do sometimes, which is probably dangerous, is I make this corner here of the white connector a little smoother by cutting it like this. Just cutting little pieces out. Of course, always cut away because it's very small and close to your face so that if something happens, it goes that way. So there's that. Hope that helps. I'm sorry, guys. This is so obnoxious. Okay. So we have covered tools, we have covered tubes, and now it's time to cover tapes and then techniques. So my favorite tapes to work with, I went through a long journey with tapes. So when I was first making hoops, I was using, the first hoops I ever made were with gaffer's tape, which gaffer's is great. It's like a cloth. It's a cloth tape. So it provides good grip, especially for beginner hoops. It also adds a little weight. You'd be surprised that if you completely cover a hoop in gaffers, it does add a nice bit of weight and a nice bit of grip. This is the 1/2 inch size, but it comes in 1 inch. It also comes in 1/4 inch. And you can do lots of fun layered things with it as well. So there's some little samples I got going on with the stripes. So I started out with gaffers. I used a little bit of duct tape as well. A lot of people, when they're starting out, they'll use like electrical tape or duct tape, maybe some gaffers too, just because electrical and duct are way easier to find. Usually gaffers for me, I had to order it online. I know they have it at the art stores though. Hey Dee, how you doing? And then what I work with mostly now are like the holographic metallic tapes that are kind of specially made for hoops. Back in my day, we didn't have those. But eventually they started being more and more common, and companies like Hoop Supplies, which is out of business, and Hoopology started producing, I think through Identitape, also them too. They started producing lots and lots of colors. And I showed you the baskets earlier, which are full of shiny, shiny, shiny. So These are my favorite tapes to work with just because they're really pretty. You know, back in the day, I was trying to make hoops that were like affordable and cheap, and so I wouldn't use them. But then I feel like people didn't buy them as much, and I didn't have that connection with the hoops. So like, I definitely recommend making hoops that you find really pretty because other people will find them pretty, and you'll just feel good about selling it. You know, it won't look like something you're not that excited about because then people will feel that. Um, yeah, so these tapes are great. They are hard to work with. Or they can be hard. There's definitely a learning curve. So the thinner the metallic tape is usually the easier. This galaxy tape right here tends to be one of the thicker ones. So if I tape a bunch of hoops with this, my hands get sore. Just because getting a good even tape job is so much about angling the tape in the proper way as you're taping it, and also keeping the right amount of tension when you're taping it, and then keeping this thumb smoothing it properly. So I literally, you can't see it, and I cut most of it off, but I literally have a callus here from the way that I tape and the way that I smooth as I tape. And I can set up a demo of that too once I'm done talking about the different types. We have gaffers, we have the metallic. I also use clear tape on some of the hoops. I pretty much always use the clear tape on the connector parts. So at the end, I try to finish off the seam with just like two bands here at the connector of clear tape on either side. Sometimes if someone needs like extra protection for a whole hoop, I'll cover the whole hoop. But sometimes I don't like the way it makes the tape look. With my patchwork portals, I'll go grab one right now. So these hoops have many tapes on them. So you'll see I have like an orange, a cream, a little bit of yellow, slightly different orange, all on the same hoop. And because I'm starting and stopping so much, I will actually cover the entire hoop with clear tape afterwards so that everything is secure. Yeah, that's the rundown on tapes. One thing I like to do with my tapes that I learned from a Facebook group. Did I learn? Yeah. So I have just these little elastic bands here. So this elastic band, because these tapes are backed with paper, it keeps the paper out of the way. And you do have to get in the habit of moving the elastic band as you go. But essentially, as I'm taping, I don't know if this is the right angle. So now the paper is not like all up in my business in the worst way. It's just staying out of my way. And then once I get to where the elastic is and the paper is again, I just simply move the elastic around, scoot the tape, and I'm back in business. So that is one little hack that I like. There's a lot of different ways that people tape. Some people actually they measure it out. They kind of know. I know Mara was talking about because she does the figure eights, and she knows like how many arm lengths of tapes it takes for one half of them. So that's what she does. Oh yeah, Shelly has one of the dreamsicles. So that's what she does. I know people tape all kinds of ways. So there's lots of ways to do it. One more hack that I want to share with you that changed my hoop making life forever. I need to find it. I'll start over here. Okay, this baby. I almost forgot the secret sauce. So when it comes to hoop tubing types, usually when you're selling a bare hoop, an untaped hoop, it's usually because the tubing itself is colored, right? So it's bare. And for a while I was like, okay, cool, that'll be easy. I'll just make more of those. But polypro can be so horrible to work with because If you're using another piece of polypro as a connector, sometimes just like the measurements are slightly off, so like we talked about the tight tubing, that can be a problem. I usually use polycarb connectors, and I don't really have a problem with those being too tight, and also they're very strong, so it makes the hoop nice and strong. Another hard thing about working with polypro is its tendency to, if you just directly cut it, it might like snag or like cut in an uneven way. So then you gotta like, sand it or like cut it with your X-Acto knife, and it's a huge pain. Someone in a Facebook group, I think it's just called Hula Hoop Makers if you want to find it. They suggested this, which is a brass cutter. It's just a different type of tube cutter. It comes in like a measurement range, so you make sure you want to get the one that'll cover the size tubings that you're working with. It is adjustable. So essentially what this does is it helps me to score the tubing first. So I'm just going to tighten it a little bit so that as I roll it around the tube, it starts to make a little line. I'll tighten it again, make the line a little deeper. And then once it's ready, so you'll see my camera is not the greatest, but you can kind of see that line in the tubing there. So that's what I just scored. So when I'm ready to cut, line it up with that line, and then when I make the cut, it's really smooth and even. I'll try to show you with just without it. That one kind of turned out okay, but actually no, it didn't. You'll see that, you might not be able to see it, but there's a line there. So I cracked the tubing because I just directly went in and cut it. It's also a little bit rigid here too. So before I had this tool, it was just hard, and I'd have to go in and sandpaper it just so it's like a nice, even cut. But with this tool, like I showed you, it ends up with a super clean cut. So this is, this is from a company called Brass Crafts. It's like a brass pipe cutter. If you look up pipe cutters on like the Lowe's or Home Depot site, it should come up, and you can see what it looks like. So these are great. I don't really use them on like the bigger PE hoops at all. I just cut it directly, but on the smaller ones, it's great. And then one other cutting suggestion I have. Someone asked me about this the other day. So of course, you're going to get the cleanest connections if you make your cut at a nice perpendicular 90-degree angle. Sometimes what happens is if you just cut things a little too directly, it starts to squish the tubing, which is annoying. So with this tape scrap, I can't find the best angle. One thing I like to do is kind of, once it's actually, met the tubing like that, before I start to actually cut into it, as I'm cutting into it, I do just a little rotation. So almost like a score and then cut. That seems to get me pretty good results. This is HDPE, so it's really nice and easy to cut. So yeah, there's that. That's what it is. Maybe I can move the camera down and I can do a demo of how to install the rivet and the push button. If there are any more questions, if people still here, let me know. But yeah, once you understand like the types of connections, once you understand the tools that you need, it's really just practicing to get good at it. I think I've definitely made over 1,000 hoops before in my life at this point. I don't know if I've made it to 2,000, but I haven't really counted everyone. I've made a lot this year. But yeah, there it is. So I feel like for people who come to me and they ask me questions, usually it's taping and connections that are the most challenging parts. So this helps a lot with connections. Just having a steady hand, being able to eyeball that angle is really important. And then when you're taping, just keeping the hard thing about these metallic tapes is they don't stretch. So if you're working with gaffers or electric tape or vinyl tapes, those tend to stretch so that you can, as you're taping, it goes around the tube a little more smoothly. But with the metallic tapes, they don't stretch. And so that's when you have to be really good about smoothing it so that, especially on the inside bubble, because inside angle, because like here is where you're usually not seeing as you're taping it, because you're taping it from this angle, and then you can like look later and be like, oh shit, there's a whole bunch of bubbles. So really, really just keeping things smooth as you go. Yeah, angles and tension. Sharing tips on pricing. Pricing sticker shock. Oh, yes, that is a whole world in itself. Do you install and drill after you wrap them? That's a great question, Tasha. Yes, I do. I feel like it makes it easier. So I will, so like this hoop here, I'll kind of like put the connector in there. I'll do the taping. And then that's after I'm done taping completely, that's when I drill the rivet, put the rivet in there, drill the push button, put the push button in there. With the figure eights, I don't have to worry about that because after it's connected, I just tape and then I go. Yeah, but I will definitely talk about sticker shock. So, and I'm still working my way around this too because it's this interesting thing of like you really want people to have hula hoops, but you don't want to make them think that it doesn't cost you anything or that it doesn't take you any work to do, because it does, especially when you're making a bunch of hoops. Like you will be sore, you will have days where you're just like, it's a lot to do. And then with pricing in general, of course, you want to cover the cost of your materials, and if you're using the nicer materials, you got to do that. Then you have to pay yourself and pay yourself well. And then there's the profit. So there's materials, there's labor, you're figuring in your hourly wage, and then there's profit. With sticker shock, I feel like a lot of it is helping people understand the value of what you're doing. Like some people just will not want to invest. It's also good to like offer things at different price levels. So maybe you have your budget hoop that's only like maybe it's only like one color of gaffers. It's like stripes on, it's super simple so that it doesn't take you long to do, but you have something in the lower end where people can buy that. That's still, a little cute, hopefully. You can do that. At this point, I just I make what I like, and if people don't want to buy it, it's for me, it's more like emotional awareness of just like, you're not going to please everyone, and you're also not the only hoop maker. So if someone doesn't want to pay what you want to receive for your creation, they can find someone else. Like it's possible. They can find someone else to buy from. They could even decide to make their own hoops as well. So not taking on this responsibility of like, I have to make everyone who wants a hoop from me a hoop, because some people just are not aware of the exchange in, what it costs to buy these tapes, what it costs to keep stock with these tubings. So it's really being solid in your own awareness of like, this is what, I'm aware of the investments I'm putting into both the time and physical effort and expertise that I'm putting into this, and then the cost of the actual materials. But I feel like and what I'm working towards myself is creating like a whole system so that like people buy their hoop from me and they also feel like, oh, I can learn from you now, even online, or I can learn from you in real life. And that they see it more as an investment, because most people, they wouldn't think twice about spending like $100 or so on a pair of roller skates or maybe a skateboard. And just highlighting that like this hoop will last 2 years. It's not made in China. It's made by a human, a fabulous human in your country, or maybe not your country. Um, uh, And yeah, helping them understand in a way that's not confrontational too, I guess is hard, because I feel like I've had my times of like in the past of feeling hurt by it, and just realizing that not everyone a lot of people, a lot of the population does not understand what it is to make something. You know, like we live in a culture where it's so easy to consume all day, and you're always trying to find a lower price, and you're always trying to smush in more. You're always trying to buy for as little investment as possible. And so it's really just like a cultural difference of, you know, I'm selling a lot of my hoops for $46, the taped ones, and they're not like that's. I could probably charge more. Like I know that some people charge more. So just knowing the other industry too, like sometimes I go on other hoop seller sites and see like, okay, what are they charging? And if you're more solid in like, well, this is kind of the industry standard, then it's a little bit it's easier, you know. So really just fortifying your own mental approach, I think, is a lot of it, and being okay with losing some customers. So yeah, definitely. And then sticker shock too. I mean, sometimes people just sometimes it's a matter of they don't want to make the investment. Sometimes they really are like they're really super interested in hooping, but they genuinely cannot afford it. And so I always like I give away a few hoops a year, like more than a few. It just depends on the vibe and the person and whether they like if I feel like the person understands what I put into it and I really feel like they are going to actually hoop with it, like it doesn't bother me to give them a hoop. And it might not be like one of my brand new hoops, it might be like a somewhat used hoop, but still factoring in that little bit of generosity so that you can kind of meet that need of like, oh wow, I can't spend that much out of my budget on this. Um, but also, yeah, just being understanding. So I'll probably do another live later on some of the other business aspects. We can talk more in detail about pricing, also like website setup and what I do as far as shipping and all of that, just so you can understand the logistics. But um, yeah, giving is fun too. Um, and then yeah, so we'll do some more stuff on the business side, and y'all let me know in the Facebook group if you're a Black hoop maker or soon to be Black hoop maker and you want to join my Facebook group. Just let me know, send me a message, and I'll send you the link. Um, and yeah, hope y'all are having fun in your hoop making lives. And yeah, I feel like that's the most important part is have fun, be creative, and share it with the world because we need all the fun and creativity we can get right now with all the transitions that are happening in this new world that we are creating. So, all right, y'all. Last chance for questions. Other than that, enjoy the day. I know I mentioned Hoopology a few times during this broadcast, but I'm one of the Hoopology ambassadors. You can find a bio and more info on me on their page. You can also visit my website at shawneeandmarvelous.com. That's where my online shop is. I teach online courses. I also teach in real life. I perform. Anything hoop related, come to me with it. You're welcome, Shelly. Yeah, I'm glad you were here. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you, Dee. Um, who else is on here? Those are the main commenters. Yes. All right, I'll talk with you all later and hope to hoop with you in real life sometime. Okay, bye. Yes.